From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Thank you for tuning in this morning, Wednesday, June 18th, 2025. We've got a packed show for all of y'all today. A lot happening in the realm for cybersecurity practitioners. We've got a lot to cover, so we're going to get right into this morning's show. Thank you so much for tuning in again. I've got my double espresso this morning right over here. Beautiful, delicious, and just what I need to power me through everything we've got to talk about on this morning's show. Coffee cup cheers, y'all. All right, let's get right into what's happening in the news with UBS now saying that some information about the bank was stolen in a cyber attack on one of their supply chain external suppliers. UBS said the information about the bank was stolen in a cyber attack on an external supplier that affected several companies. No client data was affected, although they say bank data has been affected. The UPS supplier Chain IQ said last week that they were targeted alongside 19 other companies in a cyber attack that led to the leak of data subsequently published on the dark web. Swiss newspaper Le Temps earlier reported the data on more than 130,000 UBS employees was available online, and this is a breaking news story literally published about an hour ago. So we'll keep you informed as this story develops. Make sure to follow us on social media at CyberHub Podcast, wherever you get your, whether it be on X, Instagram, LinkedIn, or anywhere else. Go check that out there. All right. Scania, the Swedish manufacturer of heavy trucks, buses, industrial and marine engines, and a member of the Volkswagen Group, suffered a cybersecurity incident where threat actors actually used compromised credentials to breach its financial services systems and steal insurance claim documents. Those claims were put out on the dark web by an attacker going by the name of Hensey, who's selling the data that they've stolen from insurance.scania.com, offering it to only one exclusive buyer. You can obviously see this in English and in Russian there. That's the post. So Scania confirmed the breach to Bleeping Computers, stating their systems were breached on May 28th using external IT partners' credentials stolen by an info stealer malware. So let's have a conversation about this for just a second. Identity's the new perimeter. And we've talked about this so many times on the show before. And yet again and again and again, we see the success of stealing credentials and being able to log in. Now, I don't have all the details here, but I'm assuming they didn't have MFA. I'm assuming they didn't have MFA because an info stealer malware stole the credentials and they were able to use those to log in. I'm also assuming that impossible travel, locking down specific systems, using VPNs to log into environments wasn't exactly a forte at Scania. And again, I'm not judging them. I'm not passing the I'm not trying to be aggressively judgmental of the organization here, but this is an organization with 59,000 employees. Is that right? They do 20 billion in revenue. So there's literally not a lot of excuses that one can argue for when you don't do the basics. And the basics in cybersecurity are really what drive a cybersecurity program forward. If you can't do the basics, especially around identity, knowing that identity is the number one target, the identity space from a vendor perspective is very, very, very congested. There's so many different companies. Some are features, some are products. But at the end of the day, you've got the tools available there. So the fact that this happened and they were able to steal the data just tells me that we have so much more work to do on the basics that we're forgetting to really do anything else there as well. So the breach was followed by an extortion phase where attackers contacted Scania employees directly using a proton.me email address, trying to extort the company, following up with publications of samples of stolen data on hacking forums. And by the way, this is a new modus operandi. So what they're doing now, and this is the second time we see this week. So it's Wednesday. I think we talked about it yesterday on our Monday show, where the attackers didn't launch a ransomware attack. They stole the data. They then used email to try to blackmail the company to keep the data away. And part of that is because ransomware, like the payments just aren't there anymore. Not a lot of companies will pay ransom for in a ransomware attack. But a lot of companies will do something completely different, which is if you're able to keep it under wraps, then you may be willing to pay something to make sure it doesn't end up on the dark web. That's there. Well, Cambodia and Thailand have been going at it, and like all places in the world that have a border, there's some border scrimmages that happen there. The kinetic side of it, where a Cambodian soldier was killed in a scrimmage with Thai forces back on May 28th. And now a Cambodian hacktivist group is ramping up cyber attacks against Thai entities following the flare up. The countries have for decades disagreed over the ownership of pockets of land along their 500-mile border, with the 11th century Pre Vir Temple being the flashpoint of the conflict. The group first claimed attacks on Thai government websites in March and expanded their scope to Thai academic and private sector entities that same month. The attacks involved denial of service campaigns, as well as defacement. So these aren't very sophisticated ransomware types of attacks. They're primarily politically motivated and hacktivist related. So we see that escalating there. OpenAI awarded a $200 million contract to help the DoD improve its AI capabilities, including for cyber defense. The AI giant announced the launch of OpenAI for Government, an initiative designed to enable the U.S. government to enhance its workers' capability using AI solutions. The DoD will be the first to benefit from this new initiative through a pilot program run with the DoD's Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office. This contract with the $200 million ceiling will bring OpenAI's industry-leading expertise to help the Defense Department identify and prototype how frontier AI can transform its administrative operations, from improving how service member and their families get healthcare to streamlining how they look at programs and acquisition data to supporting proactive cyber defense. The DoD said the $200 million will be used for development of a prototype frontier AI capabilities to address critical national security challenges in both warfighting and enterprise domain. So good for DoD there. And just remember, if you haven't yet supported Kirsten's nomination for the CIO at DoD, please make sure to do that now. There's a bunch of petitions online, and Kirsten is extremely qualified for this role, and we could definitely use a champion for cyber with Katie at the DoD. So make sure to do that and call your local elected official. So we're going to get into this story. So over the weekend, one of the more disturbing stories here locally, domestically in the United States, was the murder of Minnesota State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband, and then the attempted murder of two additional state representatives in the state of Minnesota by a, I don't want to say a deranged man. I don't want to call crazy to what seems like there's a lot of planning here. So this person was not crazy. This was a sane individual. This was a person who I believe was appointed by former vice presidential candidate Tim Kaine, Minnesota governor, to one of the committees. And now the FBI is investigating this, and they found a list of 11 data brokers in an SUV driven by the man who murdered them both. Apparently, he was grabbing their information off of data brokers, including their family informations. The data broker websites provide information not only on individuals, but also on the family members. And according to the notes, most property records in America are public. Data brokers collect a great deal of data on individuals. We've known that. We've talked about it. And in an old podcast I used to do called Goodbye Privacy, we did a whole episode on data brokers. And I'll attach it to the end of this podcast. If you haven't seen it yet, it's definitely worthwhile, the type of data they collect. So the question that derives from this is, will Congress and the Senate finally enact a bill putting data brokers out of business, or giving you the ability to actually have data brokers delete your data and not collect it anymore, kind of like a do not call list, but make it really black and white, not like the do not call list, which has a lot of gray in it. As this case is unique in the way that it's being investigated. There's a bunch of people who say, data brokers get people killed every day. I don't know about that. You need to show me proof that that's the case, and I don't think you can. So that's a very enormous. Like, that's a very outrageous claim to say that data brokers kill people every day. I don't think they kill people every day. I think they violate people's privacy every day. They allow predators to get more information on their targets every day. I don't know if they get people killed every day. The Vermont state senator who drafted the legislation said the Minnesota tragedy will give momentum to other state and federal lawmakers seeking to rein in these brokers. Absolutely. And Amy Klobuchar and Senator Ted Cruz proposed legislation last in 2023 to give lawmakers the ability to stop data brokers from selling their information online. That bill didn't pass the Democratic-controlled Senate at the time. So there's that there. Asana is warning users of its new model context protocol feature that a flaw in its implementation could lead to data exposure from instances to other users and vice versa. The data exposure was due to a logic flaw in the MCP system and not a result of any sort of cybersecurity incident. But again, it just kind of shows you how quickly this is in the supply chain. Asana is huge in project management and so forth, depending on the integration type and engagement with the chatbots. The exposed data could include task level information, project metadata, even team details, comments, and discussions, and even uploaded files. Asana discovered the logic flaw on June 4th. So these cross-organization data leaks occurred for over a month. Given the functional role of Asana, it's possible the leaks contain sensitive information that could create some privacy or even regulatory complexities for some of the impacted entities. We don't know who those are yet, but there is another case there. Russia detecting its first SuperCard malware attacks, skimming bank data via NFC. Russian cybersecurity researchers identifying the first domestic data stealing attacks involving a modified version of a legitimate near-field communication software and what appears to be a test run for a broader campaign. So you know how you tap your cards to pay? That's NFC. And so this SuperCard apparently identified as a malicious variant of a legitimate NFC gate program originally designed to relay NFC data between two devices in close proximity. Criminals have long abused this scheme to siphon funds from victim bank accounts. In previous attacks targeting European banks, attackers used compromised Android smartphones to relay data from victims' physical payment cards to attacker-controlled devices. The stolen data was then used to carry out ATM transactions. So here's the deal. If you do travel a lot, RFID cases for your credit cards with tap. Either that or don't carry them. And then make sure you can't tap your phone unless it's unlocked. Just another one. That's just ways to harden your own security. Some attackers will use social engineering techniques into tricking victims into downloading the SuperCard, disguising it as a legitimate app, while others will try to use it in heavily populated areas to steal money from people as well. So keep both of those in mind. Google announcing that they've patched 3 new vulnerabilities in Chrome 137, including 2 high-severity issues reported by external researchers. So the new defects were addressed in versions 137.0.7151.119er-1.20 for Windows and Mac OS, and it's -11.119er for Linux. So you want to make sure you get those updated. Veeam and BeyondTrust announcing patches for multiple vulnerabilities that could be exploited to execute arbitrary code. BeyondTrust releasing fixes for high-severity security defects in their remote support and privileged remote access products, warning it could lead to remote code execution through template injection. That's CVE 2025-5309er. It's got a CVSS score of 8.6. The flaw is a server-side template injection issue in the chat feature. The bug exists because input intended for the template engine is not properly escaped and allows attackers to execute code in the context of the server. According to BeyondTrust, the flaw impacts RS and PRA versions 24.2.2 and 24.2.4, as well as 24.3.1 to 24.3.3 and 25.1.1. Patches were rolled out for all affected cloud iterations and are available for download on-prem. Veeam, for their end, announced the release of the Veeam Backup and Replication 12.3.2, which fixes the 2 security defects. Those are CVEs 2025-23121 and 24286. The 23121 is a critical bug that allows a remote authenticated domain user to execute arbitrary code on the backup server. That's got a CVSS score of 9.9er, and the latter is a high severity issue that allows an attacker authenticated as a backup operator to tamper with the backup jobs, which could lead to code execution. So you want to make sure you get those done as well. The Zixel vulnerability that was exploited in a coordinated attack against Denmark's critical infrastructure 2 years ago is once again being used by attackers, according to Greynoise. The defect CVE 2023-28771 has a CVSS score of 9.8, and it's an improper error message handling issue that can be exploited to execute OS commands remotely. The November report from the nonprofit Security Center for Critical Sectors, Sector CERT, revealed that 11 Danish energy organizations were compromised in May of 2023 through that exploitation. Now, Greynoise is warning of a spike in exploit attempts against that CVE, all coming from an IP address that has not been observed engaging in other scanning or exploitation activities in the 2 weeks prior. So something to keep in mind, and you want to make sure you get that patched up. Greynoise notes that the true source of the attacks could have been spoofed, as the observed traffic was UDP on port 500. So something to keep in mind there. And finally, the UK. Oh, the UK. So 23andMe, bankruptcy filing. Someone's about to acquire them. The UK Information Commissioner's Office has fined them. Guess what? $3 million over serious security failings that lead to a profoundly damaging data breach in 2023. Strong words. Pennies to the dollar in the fine. Maybe it's because they're bankrupt and they're like, pay us something. $3 million. I mean, everyone looks at this. That's the precedent you've set. So John Edwards, the UK's information commissioner, said this was a profoundly damaging breach that exposed sensitive personal information, family histories, and even health conditions of thousands of people in the UK. As one of those impacted told us, once this information is out there, it cannot be changed or reissued like a password or a credit card number. No joke, Sherlock. Also, a $3 million fine is a joke. If your statement is correct, a profoundly damaging breach, that fine maybe should be 10 times, 100 times that. Either way, it is what it is. $3 million. There's that. I mean, these guys are just, 23andMe is paying the price for failing to protect the data they got, but it's still not enough. It's still not enough, and they're going to get bailed out. Obviously, it appears that they've already been bailed out, and so all these fines will just go into the bailout package, and I hope it doesn't repeat itself, but I'm not optimistic. That's it for our show this morning. We'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern live, right here with all the latest and greatest cybersecurity news. Thank you all for tuning in today. Really appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe, follow, share, like, and comment. Until then, have a great rest of your day, and most importantly, y'all, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.